Hello world, Kyle here with NimbleNoggin.io, and today we're going to talk about some basics of an object called the NSTimer. And my example in the Swift Components Tour app, and you see we're back on the text fields view controller. My example here is this waiting label that is animating. It's not really animating, the text is just changing, but it's maybe sort of like an older sort of waiting screen or loading screen that you would see in an older video game or something. And how I have this wired up so that this label's text changes every so often, it's actually changing every 1 second, is with an NSTimer. So let's look at the code and what's going on in the what's going on in this view controller. Up at the top of the class, I have a property for an NSTimer that we're just calling timer. So that's just so that we can reference it from different methods without having to pass the timer around. So in viewDidLoad, we're calling this method startAnimatingLabel. All this method does is sets the waiting label's text to the first string in an array of waiting strings that I have here. And each string has waiting, and then further into the array, it just adds another period. So eventually you go from waiting with no periods to waiting with 3 or an ellipsis or whatever you would like to call it. So to start this off, we are setting that label's text to just waiting with no periods, the first element in this array. And then I am initializing an NSTimer to our self.timer property. And the way that I am initializing this NSTimer is with a method on NSTimer called scheduled_timer with time interval. And this method accepts 5 parameters. The first one is the number of seconds in between fires of the timer. So we notice how the waiting label was changing its text every 1 second. So I'm just passing in 1 here for the NSTimer to fire every 1 second. We're setting the target on self and the selector to animate label. So every 1 second when this timer is running, it will call this method on self animate label. And you can also pass in a user info dictionary. You might remember that from these keyboard will show and will hide methods. We were using the user info dictionary from the NS notification objects. And then the final parameter in this initialization of the NSTimer is called repeats, and it's a bool. So we can set up the NSTimer to call the passed in selector every 1 second, or we can set it to just fire once. So after 1 second, it will call this method animate label, and then it will stop. So that's basically all it takes to set up an NSTimer. I'm going to run the app again and put a breakpoint in this animate label method so that we can see every 1 second we are going to hit this breakpoint. And as we pass over this breakpoint, we will see that the text has changed. Alright, we're back, and as soon as I opened up that view controller, you can see that we hit the breakpoints here. So let's just continue. It'll open the app again, and it'll show the simulator again. And before we have any time to realize what's going on, we're back at the breakpoint, because I guess that's how fast a second is when we're really, really intense in this. And it's a little too fast to see, so I'm just going to pull it open. We've hit the breakpoint 3 times, so the text should be at the third element of the waiting strings array. And you can see that the first string is waiting, no periods, second waiting 1 period, and third waiting 2 periods, and that's where we are now. So if we play again, we should advance to the next string in that array, and you can see we have the ellipsis after the waiting string. And then this logic down here is handling so that if the text in that UI label does match the final element in this waiting strings array, then we will reset the text back to the first element. After I continue this debug session by hitting this little continue/play button down here with breakpoint stuff, we will see that the UI label's text has reset back to this first element here. And there we have it. No periods. Thanks for watching.